Hi everyone, welcome to Ask an Armourer. My name's Kia and today I'm going to be continuing my series on how to rewire a foil, and I'm going to show you one method for how to glue down a new wire. If you watch my series on how to do this for epee, it's the exact same process, just with a couple minor tweaks for how to deal with the two wires in epee versus one wire in foil. I'm filming this as a series so that I can really go into each phase really well and try to break down all of the steps as best I can, along with pitfalls that I have encountered and hopefully you won't have to and can learn from my mistakes, as well as various pros and cons of each technique that I have learned. I'll link all of the other videos in the series down in the description for you. Now, there's no objectively correct method for rewiring, and I've had success with everything I'm going to show you. As always, the most important thing is to have a functional weapon that operates within the technical requirements laid out by the FIE rulebook. Nor are the techniques I'm going to show you comprehensive. You may know a different method based on what you have taught or discovered yourself, and if you do, let me know in the comments below, because I always like learning new ways to do this and maybe tweaking what I do so that it's a little easier. So as with the videos I have on tool recommendations, I will always encourage you to try out a variety of methodologies until you find what works best for you. To start, the parts you're going to need are your clean blade, your foil's barrel, your spaghetti wire, and a new wire. For this, the tools you'll need are a rewiring board or chain. I will link my video on how to create a rewiring board below. You'll need a wrench. You'll need a bench-mounted vise or a pair of vise grips. You'll need your foil tip setter. And you'll need some super glue. Finally, optional, you'll want a paper clip and maybe a towel. For this one, I'm going to be using a board as that's my personal preference, and if you can't find any gel super glue, I'm going to be using both gel and liquid. You can go with just liquid and that's fine. Before I begin anything, because I'm paranoid, I always make sure to test the cap size of my wire against my barrel opening size. Despite being the same type, I'm using German style here for reference, errors can occur in the manufacturing process that mean they don't fit together nicely. For example, in the past I've had caps where there was a pronounced plastic nub where it was attached to the assembly apparatus, which I had to gently sand down to smooth the cap so it would sit properly. So I just find it easier to check everything beforehand rather than needing to repeat steps as something didn't work. So here, fits nicely together. Once that's been confirmed to fit, if you have a bench vise, go ahead and set your foil up in it with the tip upwards, about ½ an inch showing above the vice's jaw, and the groove towards you. If you don't have a bench vise, just lay the foil on the workspace in front of you. Next, very gently unwind your wire. Make sure to be really careful not to kink the wire or disturb the insulation on it, as this may break the wire or lead to shorts, and then mean that you have to start all over again. Once your wire is as straightened out as possible, thread just an inch or two at the end without the cap through the barrel. The wire should enter through the larger part of the barrel and come out the smaller. Then line the wire up with the groove on the foil and tighten the barrel on just by hand. I'll pause here for a couple of notes. One, we're only going to thread a little bit of the wire through so that there's less risk in the next step. If we tighten the barrel fully down now and end up pinching or snapping the wire with just this amount, it's not a big deal. There's plenty of slack and we can still use this entire wire to continue. If you had threaded the entire wire through so that the cap is settled before tightening the barrel, there is a risk of destroying the entire wire. Don't ask me how I know this. Of course, this is not the end of the world, but it is frustrating when you've wasted a wire and you have to start this process over again. The second note at this point is some people like to put Loctite on the threads of the foil to hold the barrel on. I've never bothered at this point, as I find tightening the barrel properly will not lead to any issues, and removing a barrel that's been held on with Loctite is really annoying. And it's just one more step in an already kind of lengthy process. However, there's nothing wrong with doing this if you personally find it more secure. So feel free to try it with and without to see which type you prefer. Once your barrel is held on with hand tightening, again because I'm paranoid, I like to slide my wire back and forth a little just to make sure nothing is snagged or pinched. If all is well, I'll put a quick bend in the wire so it can't inadvertently get pulled out. And then I'll go ahead and tighten the barrel down the rest of the way with my wrench and vice grips. For more details on that, you can check out my video on how to tighten a barrel, which I'll link below. To make sure that the wire doesn't get tangled in my tools or my hands when I'm doing this, I like to hold my vice grip with my left hand and allow my wire to drape over my non-dominant, my left hand, so that it can be held up out of the way. Then I can take my wrench and move it around, readjusting as I need to. Until the barrel is nice and tight. As you're tightening the barrel, make sure that you're not inadvertently pulling on the wire at all so that it doesn't come out of the barrel. It's not the end of the world, but it is an annoyance if it comes out and then you have to loosen off the barrel again, rethread the wire, and reattach it all. And once again, I like to just double check that my wire still slides smoothly and that nothing inadvertently has gotten pinched as I tighten the barrel the rest of the way. Now that the barrel is fully tightened, it's time to pull the wire the rest of the way through. My preferred method to do this is to actually take it out of the bench-mounted vise, place the tang on the floor, so that is actually what's supporting the weapon's weight. Then I use my non-dominant hand to hold the blade upright, again using it to support the wire. See if I can't get a better angle for you. As you can see, the wire is now coming down as vertically as possible into the barrel. Then I can use my right hand, my dominant hand, to slowly start feeding the wire through. Again, this is where it's important that you had gotten the wire as straight as possible when you were unwrapping it, so that there are minimal hang-ups and kinks and bends and anything else that might lead to issues. Any rubbing that happens at this point, again, could potentially strip the insulation, which would be very bad because it could lead to shorting later on, which we really don't want. When you get to the cap end, go ahead and grab your tip setter. Then simultaneously push gently on the cap with the setter and pull the wire from underneath. This will make sure the cap gets fully settled into the base of the barrel without any wire bunched up underneath. As a final check that everything is where it should be, I always grab the spring and the tip button that are going into this and just fit them into the barrel. If they fit and depress fully and smoothly, I'll know that I'm set to keep going. If not, you may need to take a step back and try to reset the cap so that it's in the right spot to house the rest of the tip components. If it's really stuck at this point though, you may have to undo it and start this over again. Now that the cap is set, place your foil onto your workspace. I always place it with the tip towards my non-dominant hand, but whatever orientation works best for you is fine. Thread the spaghetti wire onto the end of your wire. Again, the smoother you got your wire at the beginning, the easier this will be. And you may need to take a pair of scissors or wire cutters and trim off any fuzzy ends that would get in the way. Now, this is going to be the trickiest part of the video according to everyone I've shown this method to. Basically, I'm going to be wrapping the wire around the tang and then bending the blade so that the wire is held in the groove. So here we go. Line the spaghetti wire up and place it into the widest section of the groove where it comes out of the bell guard. You'll only want a quarter inch or so here. Notice that there's a fair bit of wire tail sticking out from the spaghetti wire at this point. Now, using the thumb on one hand, for me that is my left non-dominant hand, hold the spaghetti wire firmly in position. You'll notice I'm sort of using the thumbnail so that it's just putting pressure on the spaghetti wire, not on the actual wire. Then, with my other hand, my dominant right hand, I gently pull the wire tail straight back. You want to do this firmly enough to straighten out the wire without straining or possibly pulling it out of the cap. Now, without releasing or increasing tension on the wire, start wrapping it around the tang. Make sure the wire is stayed pulled back, straight back at first, so it settles nicely in the groove rather than being pulled up at an awkward angle and popping out. Then wrap it back over itself a few times to really anchor it in place. If you do this correctly, it will stay in position securely by itself, though it may take a couple of tries to get this set properly. Once your wire is secure, it's time to place your foil into the wiring rig. Start with the tip and place that in one end. If you're using the board, it will be the end that only has one set of holes at a 45-degree angle, or you can put this into the chain and it will form the correct angles on its own. Then, making sure to hold both the tip and the end of the rig so that it stays secure, bend the tang end down to the other end of your rig. If you're using a board, it will stand up just like this, and if you're using a chain, it'll have the same shape, just not be able to stand up on its own and need to be hung. And finally, we're ready to begin gluing. If you have the gel super glue, start with that and put small dabs at either end of your foil, about 1 centimeter up from either end. This will help in a couple ways. The first is that these will form anchor points that will absorb the strain on the wire rather than it pulling out of the cap, as well as this will form a little bit of a stop for the liquid super glue that we're going to be using in the next step. If you don't have gel super glue, you can just skip this step and go straight to the liquid. Now, since I am using the board, I'm going to start in the middle at this high point so the glue can run down and I don't overglue. With the chain, just pick an end and start working your way down from there. The process is the same. So to start, I will just put a single drop of glue down and let gravity and capillary forces pull the glue along a bit. Then I'll keep adding dots along once the glue seems to have stopped, until I get to a couple of inches from where I put the gel glue down. I find it's always easier to leave more unglued that can be touched up later, rather than dealing with cleaning off too much glue. I can tell where glue is based on the darker color of the wire. If you get any bubbles or extra glue on top of the blade, you can use your paper clip to sort of work it along and smooth it out. Finally, take your towel and wipe off any excess glue. And now we wait. If you have a board, go ahead and just place it up somewhere out of the way, and if you have a chain rig, go ahead and hang that up again somewhere out of the way while we wait for this to dry. Once it is all completely cured, you're good to reassemble your foil. So that's it about the process. So let's get into some of the pros and cons. So I personally prefer this method, and the biggest pro that I find with it is that there is an equal tension across the entire wire, so that there's not a particularly high strain point at any given point along it, so there's less likelihood of a break later on simply based on the strain in the wire. Plus, as the wire is self-securing, it does mean that you have one hand that's freed up to continue to assist with other areas as you're working on this. The downside, as you may have guessed, is that it's a little bit tricky to set up and can take a few tries before you get really comfortable with this method. As a bonus, I'll talk about the difference between using the board rig and the chain rig and the pros and cons I've found in those. As you can see, again, I prefer using the board because I personally just find it a much sturdier setup. I like that the board just holds the blade in place and I can just move the board around and the entire unit works together, and it just feels a lot more secure to me. And then of course, as I've discussed in my making the board video, the board does take up a fair bit of space and can be pretty unwieldy to work with, especially if you don't have a lot of space, you're traveling, etc. So benefit of the chain, obviously, much more compact, much easier to maneuver and travel with, as well as one of the nice benefits of the chain is you can hang it so that the bend is going down, so you're guaranteed to not have any issues with overglue, as any excess glue will gather at that middle point where it could very easily be removed and not interfere with the wire or the cap end. As a funny aside, I had one particularly memorable moment that really taught me how not to overglue, where I had accidentally put on so much glue it had flowed into the barrel and completely covered the cap in super glue. Obviously, this means it's no longer conductive and I have now ruined my entire wire job, and my attempts to salvage it didn't go very well, shall we say. So in the end, I had done the entire rewire process only to have to completely scrap it and start all over again because I had too heavy of a hand with the glue. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, if you have any questions, comments, or other topics you'd like me to cover, let me know down below. See you in the next one. Bye.